Dude, it was bad. Like, the worst kind of bad that burrows under your skin and chills you to the bone even in a heat wave. I usually avoid the subway late at night, but my car crapped out, and my boss wouldn't budge on the deadline. So, there I was, crammed onto a rickety 3 a.m. train, the flickering fluorescent lights casting long, menacing shadows across the grimy car. There were only a handful of us on the train, a couple fast asleep in a corner, headphones canceling out the world, a disheveled old man muttering to himself, and a woman in a business suit with a face etched with exhaustion. Me, I was glued to my phone, desperately trying to finish my damn presentation. The train lurched to a halt between stations, a jittering stop that threw me off balance. The announcement crackled through the speakers, a monotone voice informing us of a minor signal issue. Minor. It felt like we were stuck in the belly of a forgotten tunnel. Panic started to knife the edges of my comm. My phone died with a dramatic flicker, plunging me into a world of flickering lights and unsettling silence. The muttering of the old man grew louder, punctuated by occasional frantic whispers. Great, a crazy person. Just what I needed. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The stale air grew thick and oppressive. I cast a nervous glance at the other passengers. The couple was still asleep, oblivious to the growing unease. The old man, however, had stopped muttering and now stared fixedly at the closed doors, his eyes wide with terror. Suddenly, a booming voice echoed through the train, distorted and amplified by the speakers. It spoke in a language I didn't recognize, a guttural rasp that sent shivers down my spine. The woman in the business suit flinched, her eyes flying open. Panic bloomed in the stagnant air. The old man let out a strangled cry and scrambled to his feet. He lunged for the doors, his bony hands clawing at the unyielding metal. "Let me out! Let me out!" he screamed, his voice cracking with fear. The booming voice returned, closer this time, followed by a low, rhythmic thumping that vibrated through the train. The lights flickered wildly, threatening to plunge us into darkness. Something was coming. The woman in the suit, regaining her composure, reached out a hand to the old man. "Calm down, sir," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "There's nothing we can do." "You don't understand," the old man shrieked, spittle flying from his lips. "It's coming for us. All of us." The thumping grew louder, accompanied by a scratching sound that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The couple woke up, their confused chatter silenced by the sheer terror in the air. The train lurched violently, throwing me against the wall. The doors hissed open, revealing a scene ripped straight from a nightmare. The platform was deserted, but the air crackled with a malevolent energy. The darkness beyond the station was unnatural, thick and suffocating, as if a living entity lurked within it. A low growl echoed from the depths of the darkness, sending a wave of nausea washing over me. The scratching reached a crescendo, a symphony of claws scraping against metal. Then it emerged. It was humanoid in shape, but grotesquely distorted. Its skin was a sickly gray, stretched taut over exposed bone. Its face was a mask of horror, a gaping maw lined with razor-sharp teeth. Terror froze me in place. My scream died in my throat as I watched the creature lumber towards the train, its eyes glowing with an unholy hunger. "It feeds on fear," the woman in the suit said beside me, her voice strangely calm. "Don't let it see it." Her words snapped me out of my paralysis. I forced myself to breathe, to focus on anything but the terror clawing at my insides. The others seemed to follow suit, their faces pale but resolute. The creature reached the train, its putrid stench filling the air. It slammed its clawed hand against the doorway, its guttural growls echoing off the tunnel walls. Suddenly, the train lurched forward, throwing the creature off balance. It let out a frustrated shriek and scrambled to its feet, its glowing eyes burning into our backs. The train continued to pick up speed, the creature diminishing into a horrifying shadow in the distance. The silence that followed was deafening. The lights flickered back to life, revealing a shaken but alive group of strangers. The old man slumped down on a seat, tears streaming down his face. The couple held onto each other, their faces ashen. The woman in the suit straightened her rumpled clothes, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. "We made it," she said, her voice barely a whisper. No one spoke for a long moment, the weight of the ordeal pressing down on us all. The train finally emerged from the tunnel, pulling into the brightly lit platform of the next station. People milled about, oblivious to the nightmarish scene we had just witnessed. The doors hissed open, and a wave of normality washed over us. I stumbled off the train, my legs shaky, the fresh air a balm to my lungs. I glanced back at the train, half expecting to see some lingering trace of the creature. Thankfully, it was gone, vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the chilling memory of its existence. The others exited the train behind me, each disappearing into the bustling platform. I caught a glimpse of the woman in the suit before she blended into the crowd. She turned towards me for a brief moment, her gaze locking with mine. "Thank you," she said, a hint of a smile playing on her lips before she disappeared. I stood there for a moment, the adrenaline slowly draining from my body. The city lights felt harsh, the sounds of the late-night crowd jarring. The experience left me shaken, a part of me forever changed. The next day, I went about my routine, the presentation delivered with a shaky hand, but the memory of that night lingered. Every screech of the brakes, every flicker of the lights, sent a jolt of fear through me. I never did find out what the woman in the suit meant by "it feeds on fear," but one thing was certain, the creature wasn't gone. It was down there, somewhere in the dark labyrinth of the subway, waiting for its next opportunity. And maybe, just maybe, it was already planning its return. Now, whenever I hear the rumble of a late-night train, a shiver runs down my spine. I know that some things lurk in the darkness, unseen and unknowable, and sometimes, on the last stop of the line, they choose to show themselves. The question is, will you be ready? It was the kind of cold that seeped through your clothes, gnawing at your bones. Jenny pulled her coat tighter as she descended the worn steps of the Fenway subway station in Boston. The city's heart had long since fallen silent, its pulse only felt in the periodic rumbling beneath the streets where the subway trains carried the last few night wanderers. It was just past midnight, and Jenny was grateful that tomorrow, or today, technically, was a Saturday. The fluorescent lights flickered above, casting an eerie, unsteady glow on the tiled walls. Jenny was alone, standing at the edge of the platform, her breath creating small, spectral mists in the chilly air. She checked her phone. No new messages. She tucked it back into her coat and stared into the dark tunnel. The LED display overhead promised the next train in 3 minutes. An unsettling silence enveloped the station, broken only by the distant screech of a rat somewhere in the shadows. Jenny shivered, not just from the cold, but from a growing unease. She tried to shrug it off. She'd taken the subway at all hours without incident, and tonight should have been no different. A rustling sound from the far end of the platform caught her attention. She squinted into the darkness, barely making out a figure shuffling towards her. As it came closer, she saw it was an old man, disheveled, with wild, graying hair and an overcoat that looked as if it hadn't been washed in years. His eyes, however, were unnaturally bright, almost feverish as they locked onto hers. "Evening, miss," he rasped, his voice as rough as gravel. "Hi," Jenny replied, trying to keep her tone neutral. She glanced at the display. 2 minutes. Not safe at all," the man muttered, pacing back and forth. "Not with him around." "Who?" Jenny asked, regretting it immediately. "The one in the dark. He's watching us now," the man whispered, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "He waits for the last train, waits for the lonely ones." Jenny's heart skipped a beat. The platform felt smaller, the darkness denser. Is this some kind of joke? "No joke, miss. No joke. He's been here longer than any of us. Since the old times, since the bad times. He comes with the dark." The overhead lights flickered more violently, as if in warning. The rumble of the approaching train finally broke the tension. Jenny sighed with relief. The train lights appeared, cutting through the darkness, and she stepped back, ready to board. The old man grabbed her arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Don't get on," he hissed. "Wait for the next one. Please." Ginny yanked her arm away, heart pounding. "Let go of me." He released her and stepped back, hands raised. "As you wish, miss. As you wish. But remember, he's watching." The train doors opened, and Ginny rushed inside, not looking back. The car was empty, the seats lined up like silent sentinels. As the doors closed, Ginny pressed against the window, watching the old man. He remained on the platform, staring at her with those intense, mad eyes until the train pulled away. The car was silent except for the rattling of the train on the tracks. Ginny tried to calm her breathing, telling herself she was safe now, that the old man was just a disturbed stranger, nothing more. As the train snaked its way through the tunnels, the lights flickered again, this time going out completely for a few heart-stopping seconds. When they snapped back on, Ginny gasped. Sitting directly opposite her was a figure shrouded in darkness. His face was hidden by a hood, his form indistinct. Panic surged through her, her eyes darting to the emergency intercom. It seemed impossibly far. She turned back to the figure, and her voice froze in her throat. "You shouldn't have gotten on this train," the figure spoke, voice echoing as if from a deep cavern. "What do you want?" Ginny managed, her voice a mere whisper. "To take what's left behind," the figure replied, standing slowly. "To claim the lost." Ginny felt the air around her grow colder. Her skin prickled with dread. The lights flickered again, and she knew she couldn't wait. Jumping up, she raced to the next car, the connecting doors slamming behind her with a bang. The next car was empty too, and she pressed the emergency button frantically. Nothing happened. No sound, no voice asking what was wrong. Just silence. Turning around, she saw the figure had followed her, moving silently through the doors into the same car. The lights dimmed, his form seeming to grow, to fill the space around him. "Not much further now," he whispered, and the train began to slow, pulling into another station. Ginny didn't recognize it. The signs were unreadable, the platform deserted, the lights flickering erratically. "This isn't a scheduled stop," Ginny said, her voice trembling. "It is for me," the figure responded. As the doors opened, Ginny took her chance. She sprinted out onto the platform, the cold air hitting her face. She ran without looking back, her only thought to put as much distance as possible between herself and the train. She didn't stop until she reached another platform, brightly lit and populated with a few late-night travelers. Glancing behind her, she saw no sign of the figure or the strange station. The next train rolled in, this one normal, filled with people. Ginny boarded, sinking into a seat, her body shaking. When she finally reached her stop, the first streaks of dawn were lighting the sky. As she walked home, her mind reeled. Had it been real? A nightmare? A warning? Ginny never found answers, but she never rode the last train again. The stale air of the downtown subway station clung to me like a second skin. It was rush hour, but even for a Tuesday evening, the platform was unusually quiet. A lone busker strummed a mournful tune on his guitar, the melody swallowed by the ceaseless rumble of the trains above. I, Sarah, a creature of habit, usually navigated the subway with practiced ease. But tonight, something felt off. Maybe it was the flickering fluorescent lights casting long, menacing shadows across the grimy platform, or the unsettling silence punctuated only by the creak of the rusty turnstile. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another text from Michael. "Stuck at work. Be home late. Don't wait up." Anger bubbled in my stomach. We were supposed to celebrate our anniversary night, a fancy dinner at that overpriced Italian place he knew I loved. Here I was, stuck underground, surrounded by the dregs of the city, while he was probably drowning his sorrows in spreadsheets. A rumble echoed in the tunnel, and the train screeched to a halt. Relief washed over me, momentarily eclipsing my annoyance. This wasn't my usual train, but it would get me home eventually. The doors hissed open, revealing a single, flickering light bulb illuminating the grimy interior. The train was practically empty, only a handful of figures huddled together in the flickering shadows. A shiver ran down my spine despite the stifling heat. I clambered aboard, the stale air thick with the smell of old cigarettes and stale coffee. The train lurched forward, and the fluorescent light sputtered out, plunging the carriage into near darkness. Panic clawed at my throat. I fumbled for my phone, but it was dead. Great. The only sound now was the rhythmic clacking of the wheels on the tracks and the occasional cough from one of the shadowy figures. I forced myself to focus on my breathing, willing the panic to subside. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the silence. It echoed through the darkness, raw and primal, sending a wave of terror through me. My heart hammered against my ribs, and I clung to the pole for support. Silence descended again, heavier and more oppressive than before. Then, a faint metallic scraping sound reached my ears, growing louder as it neared my end of the car. My breath caught in my throat. It was coming from the shadows, whatever it was. Terror froze me in place as a figure emerged from the darkness. It was tall and gaunt, its face obscured by the shadows. In its hand, it clutched a glinting object that sent a jolt of primal fear through me. A knife. The figure shuffled towards me, its movements jerky and unsettling. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs seemed rooted to the spot. The figure stopped just a few feet away, the glint of the knife catching the faint light from the tunnel outside. "You shouldn't be here," it rasped, its voice a low, guttural growl. My voice, when it finally came, was a shaky whisper. "Who are you? What do you want?" The figure tilted its head, and for a brief moment, the moonlight filtering through a crack in the tunnel illuminated its face. It was gaunt and skeletal, with sunken eyes and hollow cheeks. But what truly sent shivers down my spine was the blankness in its stare. It was devoid of any emotion, any humanity, just a chilling emptiness. Before I could react, the figure lunged. I threw myself back, the force of my movement sending me sprawling onto the grimy floor. The knife flashed in the dim light, missing my throat by a hair's breadth. Adrenaline surged through my body, snapping me out of my terror. I scrambled to my feet and, fueled by pure primal fear, lunged for the open door of the train. The train was slowing down, pulling into a dimly lit station. It wasn't on my usual route, the name scrawled on the platform sign unrecognizable. Without a second thought, I bolted from the train, the figure's enraged screams echoing behind me. I raced through the deserted platform, the sound of my own pounding heart filling my ears. The stairs leading out of the station seemed to stretch on forever. Finally, I burst through the exit door, gasping for breath. The night air felt fresh and cool on my skin, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere of the underground. I looked back at the station entrance, half expecting the figure to emerge from the shadows. But the station was deserted, the faint glow of the emergency exit sign the only sign of life. I stumbled down the deserted street, phone in hand, frantically searching for Michael's number. I needed to get home, to the safety of our apartment. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of a distant door sent shivers down my spine. Finally, I reached a familiar street corner and flagged down a passing cab. As I drove home, the encounter in the subway played on repeat in my mind. The blank stare, the glint of the knife, the fear that had choked me. Reaching our apartment, I rushed inside, fumbling with my keys. Relief washed over me as I stepped into the familiar hallway, the warm glow of the landing light a welcome sight. Michael still wasn't home, but the thought of being in a familiar space, with sturdy walls and a locked door, calmed my racing heart. I changed into my pajamas, the adrenaline slowly draining from my system. Exhaustion hit me like a wave, and I collapsed onto the couch, my phone clutched in my hand. Still no answer from Michael. Just then, I heard a faint scratching sound coming from the window. I froze, every nerve on edge. Slowly, I crept towards the window and peered outside. The street was empty, bathed in a cool moonlight. Then, I saw it. A dark figure, tall and gaunt, standing in the shadows across the street. It tilted its head, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the chilling blankness in its eyes before it vanished into the night. Panic clawed its way back up my throat. I ran to the bedroom, grabbing the baseball bat Michael kept for emergencies. Locking the door behind me, I backed away towards the wall, the bag gripped tightly in my hand. The scratching sound started again, louder this time, coming from the fire escape outside the window. My breath hissed in my throat. Was it following me? This sound stopped abruptly, followed by a silence that was heavier than any sound. Hours bled into what felt like an eternity. Just when I thought I could take it no more, I heard a key jingle in the lock of the front door. "Sarah, you awake?" Michael's voice called out, laced with concern. Tears welled up in my eyes. Relief washed over me, so powerful it almost buckled my knees. "Michael," I called back, my voice thick with emotion. He found me huddled by the bedroom window, the baseball bat lying forgotten on the floor. My story tumbled out in a rush, punctuated by sobs and sniffles. At first, his face was filled with skepticism, but when I pointed to the unlocked fire escape and the slight indentation on the metal railing, his expression changed. We didn't sleep that night. Michael called the police, but they found nothing unusual at the station. The blank stare of the figure haunted my dreams, a chilling reminder of the horror I had faced. The news reported a series of unexplained disappearances from the subway system, but there were no leads, no bodies, no witnesses, just a growing sense of unease among the city's commuters. I never went back on the subway. Michael bought a second-hand car, and we drove everywhere, the silence broken only by the hum of the engine and the nervous chatter that filled the car whenever we passed a subway entrance. This city, once a vibrant canvas of life and possibility, now felt like a dark, menacing maze, and somewhere in its depths lurked a nameless horror, forever etched into my memory, a chilling reminder of the night I faced death in the dead end of the subway. Most importantly, remember to stay safe, and to always trust your instincts. And if you enjoyed hearing about my brush with the supernatural, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more spine-tingling tales of terror. Until next time, stay vigilant, my friends.